Peace. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of the Foul Playland. As always, I'm your foul player. Wanted to talk about a situation that's happening in Boston regarding the migrant crisis that's been afflicting the country en masse these past couple years. And Boston, too, has joined the fray of other cities like New York and Chicago, in which they're designating themselves as cities that are willing to take on migrants, to house migrants, if you will, to give migrants their resources. Boston is the last city to follow this trend, and the governor of Massachusetts, whose name is Maura Healey, has designated a rec center in a historically black neighborhood in Boston. In fact, it's one of the only black areas in the whole city of Boston, the major black area in the city of Boston. It's a town called Roxbury. They're using a rec center in Roxbury to house migrants, and I think moving forward, they're going to be doing their processing of migrants out of that rec center. According to the powers that be, including the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, and the Boston mayor, who I believe her name is Mayor Wu, they're saying that this is a temporary measure and it's going to end in June. I don't believe any of that stuff. I also am very familiar with the city of Boston. I know how everything's laid out. And one thing I will tell you, and I've been to many cities in this country, is that Boston is by far like the whitest city. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because I love going to Boston. Boston is extremely safe for a city, or at least it was until the last time I went. No bums, like seeing that. You also have the fact that Boston is really walkable, has a lot of history to it, so there's a lot of good stuff to see, restaurants. But with this migrant issue, the area that houses most of Boston's black community, Roxbury, historically, I mean, if you're from the area, you know of Roxbury, or even if you're not from it, you know that that's like the hood, basically. Roxbury is also 46 or 49% black, which is a very high number. The other large portion of that is Hispanic, probably Puerto Rican and Dominican, and that's 29% that occupy the city of Roxbury. So you're asking these people who are in the poorest portion of Boston to take on the migrant crisis. I mention that too because Boston is insanely rich in many senses. Like the real estate in Boston probably rivals the real estate in New York. There's one area in the main part of Boston, I think it's the Charles Street area, which houses more billionaires than anywhere else in the entire world per capita. Is insane money. These are like the real liberal policymakers, the ones that don't get involved in politics, that are just swimming in tons of money, that are living in this area. In addition to the fact that there's other areas in Boston. Boston has a major banking industry, major scholastic industry. A lot of the big colleges are based out of Boston, MIT, Harvard, and that's kind of like their what they're known for, their flow, their business in a sense. So you don't find cheap real estate within Boston proper, but these immigrants aren't going to Boston proper. They're going to the black area. You know, you don't find cheap real estate in the Fenway area, which is in Boston, and kind of like part of Boston proper too. You know, but you're not going to see immigrants there, housed there. You're going to see them housed in these Roxbury area, which again is 46% black population, a city in Boston that you have a lot of people that will tell you that up until recently has a really racist history. Now flip that. This is going back to the 80s, you know, recent history. And now Boston is considered one of the most liberal cities, but you have this proposal by these really staunch, what are classically known as liberal people that reside in Boston. And when it comes time for their shitty policy of taking on migrants from other countries to live amongst them, they don't have them live amongst them. They have them live amongst the black population that's already going through it financially in Boston and these other cities like New York and Chicago. These migrants that are coming into New York are being housed in the hood. The migrants that are moving into Chicago are being housed and sheltered in the hood. Boston, you've now joined the fray. Congrats. But um, like I said, Boston, it's not very common like New York, for example, like where you'll walk anywhere in New York and you'll see a mix of everything. Boston has a, for the most part, large grouping of white people. Not many black people unless you leave Boston, and you're talking strictly Rochester, Dorchester, Mattapan, Lynn, which are kind of like the hoods where Spanish and black people live. And I'm pretty sure that based on the fact that Boston is kind of tiny, a lot of historical shit there that can't be moved, you can't fit much by way of residences in Boston. Boston doesn't have a lot of high rises. They're like a very old timey kind of city. So these migrants are going to be housed outside of the main Boston area. And the first one that got laced, you guessed it, Roxbury. And, you know, don't let liberal media dictate how you could speak on this, because at the end of the day, and the reason I say that is this, because if they leave it up to you, like they have in Chicago and in New York, they'll bring the argument into, hey, you know, well, these places are really cold and you can't let these people freeze. I mean, and nobody would ideally let somebody freeze, let a human being be outside and freeze because there's nowhere to house them. So it makes a situation that's in the summer, like maybe inconvenience um, into an issue, a health issue, a safety issue in the winter because somebody could die out in the cold. But they don't think long term like that, hey, we don't have anywhere to house them as it relates to Boston. No. They say we don't have anywhere to house them for now, but in a bind, we could make a black community suffer. And that's what they've done here in the case of Roxbury. And that rec center is used for year-round running and gym activities, and it's a central part of that community, even though it's owned by the state. But the state played them. Like there's tons of places elsewhere in the state of Massachusetts that they could have housed in, and this decision seemingly is coming directly from the governor of Massachusetts. They could have housed them anywhere, you know, Springfield. I mean, even though that's the hood too, or anywhere else in Massachusetts, but they went to the black community of Boston first because at the end of the day, these liberal politicians are more racist than anything you could conjure up in the Deep South. The Deep South people think that racist probably think along the lines of they don't want to deal with your ass. The liberal racists, which is pretty much almost all liberals, think that black and Spanish people can't think for themselves, so they have to think for us. They don't think that Roxbury, this black community in Boston, would have came to the bright conclusion of wanting to disservice themselves, a community that's pretty poor, by housing an even poorer community of migrants. No, they thought in the case of the liberal politicians of the state of Massachusetts that they knew better or they knew more than the people of Roxbury and housed these migrants right amongst them. So we'll see what comes of this. I mean, liberal politics, it's all a joke. You know, I remember vividly, like when many years ago, a couple of years ago actually, when they were making it seem like 45 was a demon incarnate for housing kids in cages in the border, and they kept circulating the same couple of pictures. Then come to find out that those pictures that they took of the kids in cages at the border were actually taken during the Obama administration, and that he had the same policy in place. Now you have kids at the border getting raped, like the case of the one girl who was found to have 7 different male DNAs that were inside of her, and she was only 8 years old. A young girl they found at the border. Countless people that are dying in the process of coming here, not only at the border, but before they get there, when they go through the jungles in Panama, or when they have to carve through Colombia, um, and being escorted by the worst um, cartels, not only in Mexico, in Ecuador, all the other countries that are having these cartel problems. You know, you're financing the cartel by having the cartel be the central operators of the ferrying of people from these countries in South America and Central America up to Mexico. Meanwhile, these women are getting violated, kids are getting violated, separated from their parents by force along the process, and no mention of that. No stories have broken in that vein. The best I've seen in that case has been from YouTube. I think Bold and Bankrupt had a video in which he did the trek from some country down south in a migrant caravan up to Mexico. Meanwhile, and he's showing that the cartels were the central operators; they were the guys in charge. Um, and along the way, he also showed a few dead corpses. You know, and we're the liberals that are crying about these people. Because it's not a case of these people coming to America and finding the American dream. They may search for the American dream, like I searched for the American dream, like a bunch of black and Latin dudes in the hood have been searching for the American dream, and that's not that easy to find. Now, you're telling me that you want me to make some blank sucker argument that these people are solely after chasing the American dream, and that my heart should tug for them just on that principle. Go. When it's hard for any hood motherfucker USA to find that same American dream in 2024 than it ever was. Right now, everybody in the hood suffering, going broke. I've never had the amount of dudes ask me to borrow money as I have in the past couple of years, and it only happens more and more in more frequency nowadays than it has in the past. And that's all based on the shithead that's been in office for the past 3 years, so mostly, but it's also due to the fact that this things are way more expensive in this country, and now you're telling large groups of people to come into the country and pay astronomical rents, cram themselves into smaller apartments for more money, spread more disease, even though the biggest issue that we were going through in 2021 a couple years ago was this mystery disease that came out of nowhere. Now you're telling a mystery class of people to come into the country that carry God knows what diseases, unvetted, unchecked for anything, criminal class of people. Just a couple days ago, they beat up a cop in NYPD cop in Times Square. 6 migrants, 5 of them, they all got 6 of them got arrested. 5 were already released without bail, and that's what we're signing up for in the hood. But you're basically signing up for a worse hood that was already worsening just in the past couple of years. But you're signing up for making it far worse by having these mystery groups of mostly men show up at our doorsteps. But let me know what you guys think. I made a long ass video regarding this subject. Unfortunately, StreamYard won't let me upload it because it's 5 minutes too long, and I'm not gonna pay for a StreamYard subscription. but I'll do a live stream on the subject too, because this goes more into a theory of black replacement. Some people will tell you about the white replacement theory, and that um, was being scoffed at. But now we're getting a bit of black replacement theory, as far as liberals having prayed at the golden calf of suffrage of black people since um, 2016, where liberals made that a real popular clause with them. Not talking about black liberals, I'm talking about white liberals, but they made it seem as if police brutality was a central issue, or black suffrage was a central issue. To now, a couple of years later, make black people in New York, Chicago, and now Boston and Detroit suffer more by giving the little that they have, or sharing the little that they have with a group of Mr. Me migrant men. But let me know what you guys think. I hope you guys like, subscribe to my shit, and I'm gonna try to come at you with a live stream on the same subject soon. With that, I'm out. Peace.